Hello everyone and welcome to my final mid lane tier list of the year. So this is for patch 13.24 and this is going to be a longer video than normal because I'm actually going to talk about two tier lists. So I'm going to do the high elo tier list first, which is the one that's on your screen here. And then I'm also going to talk about a lower elo tier list, maybe for platinum, maybe emerald and below. And I'll talk about that later in the video. So if you just want to skip to that, there's a bunch of timestamps in the description so you're able to jump around. But for now, we'll begin with talking about the high elo tier list. So high elo for most of this split has really just been defined by having the ability to both win lane and scale. And this is mainly because Syndra and Ori set such a high benchmark for other champs to pass, which has kind of, suffocated the mid meta a little bit. But as you can see, there hasn't been too much movement since the last patch, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you why Syndra and Ori are so OP for the 10th time in a row. But I will talk about the couple of things that I've moved, and also obviously Hwei being added. So Hwei is what I'm going to talk about first. So Hwei has been played in high-low a fair amount now, and if you go in Korean solo queue, it's been played to mixed success. Right, here's Chovy trying it with Electrocute. There's some games with First Strike, with Comet, different builds. We've got like Luden's build, Leandry builds. So you can see like a lot of people are trying it. The success so far is kind of, it's to be expected, right? It's all over the place, really. It's a difficult champ to play, and I think it also somewhat struggles in the meta. That being said, I do have it in my A tier. So in my A plus actually. So the reasoning is that I think Hwei is actually really, really strong. I think that he has the ability to neutralize most matchups just by having such great wave clear so early in the game. And also he has really great defensive tools for kind of peeling people off him. Not so much that are engaging on him, but that are trying to trade with him. So an example I can give you is like, if you're playing something like Hwei versus Syndra and Syndra wants to walk up and trade with you, you have the ability to fear her, away from you. You can QQ because you've got longer range than her. So you have ways that while you can't necessarily bully your lane, you have ways to neutralize or lane defensively that will allow you to get through even some difficult lanes without too much difficulty. He also scales very, very well. And I do think that Hwei is, I think he's strong. I've said that many times before. And I think the main, reason why his win rate is so low is because, one, he is a very difficult champ to play. I think this is the kind of champ that Riot could leave for maybe 2 or 3 months. And then, when people have like 100 or 200 games on him, the win rate would be much higher, right? I definitely think it's quite a, difficult champ to play. I also think it's the nature of playing champions that are more scaling focused is that they tend to be like greedier picks, right? Like this is a champ without a dash and that likes to scale. And that means that naturally it's not going to be a champ that kind of gets first pick, blind picked every game, right? And obviously when people are trying it, that's what they're doing, right? They're just locking it in because they want to learn the matchups. They just want to play the champ. I mean, that's what I've been doing. So I think so far you don't really have the best read, I guess, on like how strong the champ actually might be because, again, no one can really play him properly. And because the situations he's been picked in are probably pretty bad. If I take a champ like Sylas, right? Sylas is strong because you pick him in games where you have, ganking jungle, ganking supports, where you have great ultimates, where your lane isn't too hard, where you're versus mobiles, basically when you know you can snowball, right? So if Sylas came out today, obviously like Sylas is pretty different from when he first released, but if Sylas came out today, you'd expect him to also have a fairly low win rate to begin with because, people aren't picking him in those unique situations. That being said, obviously Sylas is easier than Hwei, I think, to pick up at least. But what I'm trying to say basically is that I don't think it's fair to judge Hwei's win rate so hard because I do think he has a lot of potential. And I think when people figure out, how to play him, when to pick him and stuff like that, it will be good. Now, my general advice for like when you should pick this champ and all that sort of stuff. So I believe the best build overall, I do believe Comet is the best build, and I think CDR builds are the best. So what I would recommend is probably something, let's see what runes he has. I'm guessing, yeah, I would recommend something like this. I think DMATs are really, really important. I've talked about this in my Hwei video, but I think having DMATs for 2 melee, 1 range is probably the best and allows you to just clear out the wave completely. I do think that Scorch or Gathering is kind of, it can be changed. Obviously, like the champ scales very well, which makes Gathering very good. Scorch can be used almost defensively in a way. Again, like if you need more trading power just to get yourself through the lane, that can be pretty good. But I do think the CDR builds are better. So there is like an argument for a pen build, something like Illusion Shadow Flame, because his cooldowns are quite low anyway. At the same time, like having lower cooldowns is very, very important at the moment. So that's the kind of general build I would recommend. As for when to pick him, I think if you can ever get a lane that you're not going to get bullied too hard in. So the lanes I'd kind of recommend staying away from at the moment is I would try to stay away from like Neeko, Syndra, Ori. and maybe some of the assassins with gang setup. So I'm thinking stuff like Fizz and LeBlanc. I actually think there's most other champs you can kind of be fine. And I think if you ever get some matchup where you're basically just bouncing waves back and forth, like Hwei versus Taliyah, for example, or Hwei versus Ari, I think you're very, very happy with these matchups. You know, Hwei versus Azir, that's another one. Those are going to be really, really solid for you. And I think you scale very, very well into these games. So yeah, that's when I would recommend picking him at the moment. At the same time, you probably just benefit from having more games on him at the moment. You know, like just getting more reps on him because he's not super easy to play. So yeah, that's my general thoughts on Hwei. I think a lot of you in the comments will probably say that Hwei is far too high. And on some level, I do agree with you, right? Like the win rate suggests he should be a lot lower. But I really do think this champ is very powerful. It just like needs some time, and he's getting buffed at the moment, which we'll talk about. So the next thing is Neeko. So Neeko is a champ that I've underrated, I think, a little bit. She's always been like kind of in my upper echelon here, but I do think that Neeko, you know, she's always kind of been outscaled in terms of damage, but she still maintains like a lot of strength in terms of just getting like big ultimates and stuff like that. And I think as one of the champs, as maybe the strongest laning champ at the moment, maybe like neck and neck with Koma or Orianna, I think that if these champs are getting banned or picked away, Neeko is definitely something that should be looked at. And I actually think that, well, I'm not very good at Neeko, I'll say that, but I think that this is a champ that even without your W and passive being used properly, it's still quite impactful, right? Like she still is a very strong lane bully, she still is a very strong team fighter. Obviously, if you're very good at Neeko, then I think she could maybe even go higher, but personally, I'm not. So yeah, that's kind of, those are the only real champs that I've moved around. So next I want to quickly talk about this B patch coming. So I believe this comes in about a week's time. It normally comes out on, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember which day it is. I think it's Wednesday for me. Normally comes out, so that should be a week. What day is it? I think it's Tuesday. Yeah, it's Tuesday. Funny that. It comes out a week from today, and these are the champs being buffed and nerfed. So they talked a little bit about this, kind of the changes. They haven't said, at least at the time of making this, what the actual changes are. They've only talked about, you know, kind of goals, you know, throwing champs a bone, making sure that they're like a little bit stronger here and there. So overall, like, do I expect these to really change anything? It kind of depends, right? It depends how big they are. And because we haven't seen the numbers, I don't actually know. What I will do is, because this tier list will come out a fair amount before this patch, is when 13.24b does come out, if the numbers are pretty big, I'll pin a comment below. So if you're watching this later in the patch, I'd recommend checking the pinned comment and just seeing if any of these made a difference, because sometimes they can make placebo buffs and nerfs that don't actually like change it so much. So an example would be something like Corki, right? Like Corki, the problem with Corki is that, like many other champions at the moment, he is a champ that both he scales very well, but he doesn't win lane. In fact, he's very weak in lane, and he can't really neutralize until 6. So you have this entire pre-6 of just getting absolutely destroyed by stuff like Syndra Ori. And while yes, you do outscale Syndra Ori, it's not by a significant margin, right? Like I think in terms of late game DPS, I would say Syndra is like very comparable to Corki, right? But you're giving up a very pretty much the first 6, maybe even 10 minutes of the laning phase for that, and it's just not much of a trade-off. So if they go and buff Corki and they just give him a little bit of damage, I actually don't think that would really impact his place in the meta at all, because the problems Corki have, it's just not damage, right? I mean, I guess if they made like his late game absolutely insane, right? Like if they made him just the best late game scaling champ in the game, then sure, like maybe we can make an argument for it. But what I think is going to happen is that for the most part, these are going to be very small kind of placebo buffs and nerfs that do impact numbers. And sometimes like numbers obviously can be very impactful, but I do wonder if like Riot's probably like a little scared because they didn't want to make changes to Orianna Syndra. They said that before, and I think they've only made the changes because they got so much backlash. And I think it's the same with some of these champions here, where I expect that they're going to give them buffs and nerfs just to kind of say that they've looked at them, but I actually don't expect their placings to move a whole lot. But I mean, hey, we have to wait and see the numbers. So yeah, Corki, I don't expect him to really change. As I said before, Hwei, if they make some quality of life changes, like I think if they made WW and EW feel a bit better to cast, that would be good. At the same time, I don't know, like they could buff his numbers, maybe some like scalings more. Like I feel like his AP scaling as a whole, like he scales well, but he scales well because he has low cooldown. So he doesn't scale so much because he's doing like just tons of damage off every ability. So maybe some more, you know, percent AP scaling could be good. I'm not really sure. Neferi, I mean, got absolutely destroyed before. So honestly, they could probably revert the Neferi nerf, or at least like half revert it, and then it wouldn't be too bad. Like I think Neferi is just kind of a low elo terror, and I think like yeah, actually if Neferi gets buffed in a big way, she probably will go up a lot more on my low elo tier list, because I think it is very simple assassin to play, which is very, very nice. But I think she always kind of struggled in high elo. Warwick mid, obviously not a champ that we play. And yeah, so these champion nerfs. So Orianna and Syndra, like I think I would be very surprised if whatever nerf they made actually pushed Orianna and Syndra out of S tier, unless they were very significant nerfs. I expect what's going to happen is they just drop like a little bit of damage here and there. So maybe it's like 5 damage off Syndra Q and I don't know, like a tiny bit of percent scaling or yeah, AP scaling off of Ori's ult or something. I could see that putting them kind of like more in the A tier, which would be nice, right? Like if that were balanced and then we had a bunch of like A+ tier champions to choose from, I think that would be very, very nice. At the same time, again, I don't really expect that. I think that they're going to go very light on the nerfs and just wait for the new items to come through. Sylas and Yone. So I think that these actually have more potential for movement. So I think that I'm a little surprised that Sylas is getting a nerf because I think Sylas is a champ that like is artificially inflated and deflated. Like I said before, he's very good in some games, he's very bad in some games. And I think that I honestly don't think Sylas deserves a nerf despite being high up. I think it's fine to have champions that are quite, you know, strong in just like, you know, specific spots here and there. But if overall they feel like he's just too much of a terror, then I expect maybe they'll nerf like a little bit of his magic resist or something just to make him a bit more punishable in lane. At the same time, like some champs absolutely blast this champ in lane. So again, I don't know, just wait and see the pin comment, I guess. And Yone, another champ that I don't really think is particularly OP. I think if anything, Yone's items are OP, so stuff like Hullbreaker can be very frustrating to play against. But I think Yone is like fairly balanced. Again, he's like a good counter pick to certain champs. He's one of the more viable AD mid laners, and I think that's something Riot has to be quite careful of. Is I feel like in high elo, there's not that many blindable AD mid laners, and you know Yone isn't really blindable either, but he's like more blindable than some of the others. And in general, I feel like a lot of AD mids are kind of weak in very high elo solo queue. Like a lot of AD mids tend to be assassins, right? Which obviously in lower elos or in kind of like the mid elos where people are good at playing them and can still find snowball tend to be very powerful. But I think at the moment, like, you know, champs like Zed don't really feel that impactful. I think that like the mages just tend to beat them in lane and outscale them, so they never really find like that right window into the game. Obviously there are still some, you know, that are solid, but I'm a little surprised by that. But yeah, anyway, I think that's going to kind of conclude my talk about the high elo tier list. Like I said, I don't need to go over it too much, I don't think, because not much has changed. So a lot of my explanations in previous videos still hold up. And I think, again, like the meta is very focused around like these champions at the top. Obviously, if you want clarification on anything, feel free to comment it below. Now we're going to talk about the low elo tier list, which is for elos platinum and below. And there's a couple things I kind of want to explain and talk about before we get into it. So the first thing is, what do I think is actually valuable in low elo? And also, what is valuable for low elo players? So something that I see all the time is, you know, aren't champs like Zed broken in low elo? And the answer is like yes and no. So like a high elo player playing Zed in low elo, yes, that champ would be very broken, right? Like champions that can snowball very effectively against players weak than you or weaker than you are very, very strong, right? So champions like Aurelia or LeBlanc or Katarina Akali, if you can play them well, are very strong in low elo. But this is generally not the case. And it's not just the champion, it can also be the game plan, right? So a champion like where's an example? A champion like Corki is actually not too difficult to play the champion itself, but he has a difficult playstyle, right? You have to neutralize the early game. You have to make sure you're CSing very well. You have to play around the packages. There's a lot of side laning and stuff that goes into it. So even if the champion itself might be mechanically simple, I don't think it's super easy to pull off the game plan in low elo. At the same time, maybe if you're really good at side laning or something, you could move this up. In fact, maybe you could move it all the way up to here, right? And that kind of brings me to the second point, is don't worry too much about where champs are ranked within their tiers, right? For the most part, I've just tried to rank things by, you know, one, how easy are they to execute? How much like consistent impact are they going to have, whether you play like good or bad, and not having like difficult mechanics or difficult win conditions to pull off. But I haven't focused, I mean, I've like tried a little bit to rank them within tiers. You know, I didn't just like throw them in randomly, but you can make very solid arguments for both like good and bad things for champions within tiers. So I'll give you some examples. Syndra, for example, you know, Syndra, very strong scaling champion at the moment. At the same time, you could say that she's lower, right? Because like she does have a strong laning phase, and if you don't take advantage of that, the champ is definitely weaker. She's also very heavy on skill shots, and she has a lot of difficult combos. So if you're not making use out of these, you know, maybe Syndra should be way lower, maybe should be in C tier. At the same time, just having the consistent outscaling win condition and getting to the point where you kind of just like drop your ult and stun off it, and that's pretty much all you need to do, I would say that makes her higher. But like, and I'm sure you guys will comment it below, you can make arguments for just about anything on this list about why it should be higher or lower. So see this less as like I'd say the high-low tier list is very like concrete or very defined almost. Like I've kind of thought about everything on this list, and I definitely kind of think, at least in the high-low meta, this is where they stand. I think in the low-elo tier list, though, just I would focus mainly just like as a rough guideline where they are, and like don't worry too much about one champion being slightly higher than the other. For the most part, again, I think just stay away from champions that are either very difficult to play mechanically or have very difficult game plans or are really reliant on snowballing or something like that. For the most part, you want to play easy to execute champions that scale well. If they snowball well, something like Fizz, that's a bonus, but it's definitely not required. Is there anything on this list that is like really in need of explanation? I think for the most part, these kind of explain themselves. I mean, maybe a champ like Taliyah might be confusing. I think Taliyah is another champ that like there's a lot of skill to Taliyah with like your W and your R. At the same time, you can just find so much consistent impact with like your Q and your E. So I find like you could literally just not skill your ult on Taliyah and you'd probably still find success on her in low elo. But yeah, honestly, I would just be interested to see like what you guys kind of think of this. There were some other champs that I thought maybe should be way higher. You know, like a champ like Jayce. Right, like even though Jayce is difficult to play, he's actually got a very easy game plan right now where basically you just like every item you spike on, right? You hit Dirk, you hit Ghostblade, then Manamune, Cyrildas, Shojin. Every one of these feels amazing, and all you really have to do is like poke before the fight start, right? At the same time, I put him lower because I feel like he does require a bit of mechanical skill, but I feel like there's a pretty decent argument for Jayce being a lot higher. So yeah, this again, general guideline. Let me know what you guys think. If there's any you think should be way higher or should be way lower. I am pretty confident about the S and A plus tiers. I think these champs are very, very strong in low elo. And if you're really struggling to climb, you would probably benefit from swapping to one of these, at least to use it, almost like use these simple champs as an opportunity to learn the game better. Because ultimately, like the champion is kind of just like it's like a vessel for you to like experience the game through. Wow, that sounded quite profound. I didn't mean it like that. What I meant basically was like ultimately like your gameplay as a player will matter much more than your gameplay through the champion, right? Like if you take a challenger player with all their challenger fundamentals and you have them first time, even a difficult champ in lower elo, they're going to win through their fundamentals, right? At the same time, champion skill is a fundamental that can't be ignored. And so like if simple champs with easier fundamentals and easier to play will allow you to focus on the fundamentals while also making sure that you're not being held back by your champion. So I think that's my overall thoughts. I don't think I really have anything else to say. Again, sorry for the slightly longer video. I did just want to make it a little bit longer and a bit more in depth, just so I could cover all the elos going into this last patch. Of course, I will talk a lot about the new season stuff when that comes out. And I will, again, pin a comment about 13.24b when the changes end up going live. But otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Please let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'll be sure to get in a lot of angry debates with you all. And yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.